Welcome. You're listening to the IT/OT Insider podcast. I'm David and I'm joined today by Anupam Gupta. He's a co-founder and head of strategy at Celebal Technologies. Welcome, Anupam.
Thanks, David.
So, Anupam started as a developer, and I'm sure he has many interesting stories to tell us about those years. And then he co-founded Celebal in 2015. They are, amongst others, SAP, Microsoft, and Databricks partner, and they use that knowledge to bridge the gap from IT into manufacturing. And that's super interesting because I would say typically on this podcast we talk about the other way around. We start from the shop floor and we look towards IT. Very interesting episodes in front of us. And as usual, why don't you start with your personal background story and that of Celebal?
Sure. So, David, I did my engineering in India from IIT Bombay, which is one of the premier engineering institutes in India. I studied electrical engineering, which covers electronics and communications as well. I actually happen to be a second generation electrical engineer. My dad is still a practicing engineer at this age. And he designs and builds power transformers, power and distribution transformers. So I've always had that legacy.
Cool.
I started my professional career as a developer at SAP. Started working with SAP Labs in India. I had some brief stints in Germany and US as well during my days at SAP. And then moved on to consulting, worked for Deloitte Consulting for some time in the Asia Pacific, Japan region. And then moved on to US. I'd been in US since 2003. I co-founded a typical SAP consulting firm. I was part of that. And before meeting my current co-founder, back in 2015. And 2016, we formally started Celebal Technologies.
You hear that often, right? So people who they have an engineering consulting background, and then at a certain point in time they probably think you probably thought like there is something I can do better or in a different way, or was that also your story?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're part of building products, you also want to have that customer-facing experience. That how do we implement these enterprise solutions for our customers, and that's a different learning altogether. You get to learn about their business and how they are using these enterprise software and so on. And SAP is such a wide business software system, right? And I call it the brain of the organization, right? Or any large ERP. Of course, SAP leads the pack there globally. And I tell my colleagues that, hey, and customers that, hey, you can replace every part of your body, but you cannot transplant the brain, right? So in that sense, ERP is the heart and center of everything.
If we look at it from a control systems perspective, we often say the same for a SCADA or DCS environment, which is the heart and the brain of operations. What makes an ERP system the heart of the brain of an enterprise?
You see, SAP started in early 70s, right? It was the first comprehensive large piece of software that could combine all aspects of an enterprise, right? Right from finance and internal accounting, controlling, all the logistics, sales and distribution and inventory aspects, the human resource aspect, and they added CRM later on and everything, right? And they all talk to each other seamlessly, right? So that's the system for any large organization, particularly which has manufacturing and logistics processes, right? To automate all their processes, as well as the core system of record, right? So the only thing that's outside of ERP in those days is the actual manufacturing, right? Which is the world that you come from, of manufacturing execution and everything. But that also kind of relates to your ERP, right? Your plant maintenance and your maintenance orders, and everything goes into financial postings and all. So that was the big win for ERP systems, and you saw the whole mass implementation of ERPs across the globe, right? In almost 20 plus different industries. But it was always heavy on the logistics and manufacturing and product costing side, right? So you would find ERP and SAP more on the manufacturing, all kinds of manufacturing, discrete process. You'll find them in oil and gas. You'll find them in energy utilities, power and utilities, right? And when I say manufacturing, part of CPG and pharmaceuticals is also manufacturing. While we may classify them as separate industries, but they are also core manufacturing for most part, right? So ERP is very relevant for those industries as well.
In a typical stack, I would say we have a control system, we have a manufacturing execution system environment. On top of that, in some way or form, less or more complex. And then I would say typically we see the MES system also as the gateway to the ERP environment. Is this also what I would say what you have seen in your past? Are there also MES-alike features available in ERP systems, or should they be split?
So, see, there are offerings. There have been offerings from the ERP vendors for MES capabilities, etc. But I have more often seen specialized MES systems outside of ERP, which would obviously integrate with ERP. It also deals with the fact that a lot of times you would acquire small subsidiaries or plants, and if you're an oil and gas company, you would buy wells and things like that, right? So. Typically, you would have a separate software doing the MES, right, which you may or may not uh, consolidate. But if there are small ERPs, typically I've seen large companies consolidating that into one central ERP, or at least the same software, be it SAP or something else.
Now, when you co-founded your company, it's about 10 years ago. Was stepping into the manufacturing domain, was that already by design, or was it more a bit of a logical consequence of the stuff you were doing on the ERP side?
So I was doing a lot of SAP consulting, and even there, my specialty was in some of the data and mobility concepts, right? So bringing data from ERP systems, being SAP and other systems, and consolidating that into a single data warehouse, which used to be SAP BW for most part. Occasionally, we would have the likes of Teradata, etc. also. And one of the gap that I saw in the industry is, there is ERP, but there is a lot of non-ERP data also that is getting relevant, right? And that's the phase around 2015, 2016, where enterprise cloud was getting popular. Although the journey started more from infrastructure side of things, but we were more focused on data and AI from day one, right? And I met my co-founder. His name is Anirudh, and he's my co-founder and CEO as well. He came from the data science background, right? So I came from the traditional enterprise background,
Yeah.
and we married our skills. I knew about data, but I was not so much on the machine learning side and the data science. And that's the skill and experience he brought in, and we collaborated with that, right? And there was a gap. So when we talk about Celebal, we talk about, hey, we are at the right intersection of traditional enterprise and modern cloud innovation, right? So you have a lot of companies who have deep strength on the traditional enterprise systems like ERP, people who implement ERP. And then you have a lot of companies who are good at data and AI and cloud and all the automation stuff. Uh, we are unique in a way that we bring these two worlds together, right? We can talk the ERP language, the industry language from energy, utilities, oil and gas, manufacturing, and IoT. But we also know how to use the cloud innovation, how to use a platform like Databricks to,
Yeah.
to marry these two worlds.
So that asks, I would say that triggers an immediate follow-up question here. So obviously we talk a lot about data and what is industrial data, also on the blog and in other podcasts. We haven't touched so much the transactional side of the world yet. Maybe what is you from your perspective? What is unique in the data you see in manufacturing, Industry 4.0 type of applications, compared to other industries, other verticals, or maybe even compared to, I would say, the more financial order type of data?
Great question. So as you probably saw, the data modernization for financial services and retail customers started earlier, and they have been on an accelerated path already, right? And the key difference between these industries and the core heavy industry or manufacturing is the dematerialization of data has already happened, right? In financial services or retail, right? You
Yeah.
have the data. If you have an e-commerce website, even for the retailers, the data is already there, most of it, right? For financial services, the data is already there for most of it because they start from a digital first world, right? At
Yeah.
least for last
Yeah.
couple of decades, right? So I use this word that the dematerialization of data has already happened, right? Whereas when you talk about the heavy industries, the manufacturing and energy industry, data is you have access to some data at a transaction level, right? But consolidation of data, right, into a central lakehouse platform like Databricks has just started to happen, right? So the data would be either logged in some of your IoT systems or historians and so on, right? And then it would be logged in some legacy ERP systems, and you have systems that could report on ERP data, but that's not good enough, right? You want to combine it with the systems that you mentioned, the manufacturing execution systems, uh, different kind of IoT sources, automation, etc., right? So you want to marry these two. And then there are other data points like your third-party logistics and then different data for demand sensing, etc., right? Now, modern cloud-based data platforms like Databricks uh, gave you that opportunity to consolidate all this data from all these different sources, right? And then get insights on top of it, do automation on top of it, right? Uh, there are also a few, I would say, uh, geopolitical or economic factors that add to it, right? I see that most of the manufacturing shift to either Asia or Latin America or some of the so-called developing countries, right? And a primary reason for that is a cheap labor, right? Low-cost labor. That was the main factor, right? Now I see a trend where a lot of this manufacturing will come back to the Western world or to the developed world, right? If I talk about America, right, and here's my thesis on this, right, you need a few key factors for manufacturing, right? You need cheap land, you need low cost labor, you need technology in today's times, you need cheap energy, right? And you also need access to capital, right? Now, the majority of capital markets is already there in the developed economies, particularly America, right? And you have all these factors. You have a lot of land, you have cheap energy, right? And there is obviously America is the leader in technology R&D, right? The factor that is missing is the high cost of labor is makes it a challenge to manufacture in America or Western European countries for that
Yeah.
matter, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, my theory is if maybe 50-60% of this labor gets replaced by automation and robotics, right? Which we see happening already, right? You have companies like Tesla, then you have a lot of semiconductor manufacturing coming back to America, right? Riding on this innovation of robotics,
Hmm.
automation, right?
Hmm.
And data is the central piece of it, if you look at it, right?
Yes.
Which was historically logged in all these systems, right? Now that is coming out, right? Sometimes real time and sometimes you have batch data, etc., combining together to achieve all this automation, right? So these are the trends that are driving innovation and data modernization in these industries, some of which already happened in other industries, right? Another industry is the energy industry, right? Obviously most of it cannot be outsourced, right? You have to have your power utilities in the country where you're consuming the power, right? You have to have power generation. You also have to have the oil and gas exploration and refineries, etc., right? In these countries, right? So that will force a lot of this automation right, to save cost on labor, right? And that's driving this whole data modernization journey.
There is that's an interesting take, and also about, I would say, these regional differences. That's very interesting. There is maybe there's another topic which is related to this, dematerialization of data, is data governance and data management. Something we also talk about quite often. It's we do that on purpose because I truly believe that we need to educate the world much more on data governance, data management in manufacturing. Um, the example I always give, and this will definitely resonate with you, is there is not a single ERP system where without data management. Because if there is no data management on your ERP layer, then everybody would just be, I would say, booking materials and sending invoices and however they like. However, on the manufacturing, on the shop floor, there is hardly any data management. People just create data points as they as they like. So how do you see this let's call it the convergence of how ideas from the IT world and the way manufacturing shop floor systems work. Um, what do you see happening in this domain? Is there do you see these steps? Do you see systems enabling? Do you see companies changing their way they think about manufacturing data?
I see a lot of conversation on this topic. I have not seen systems of unified governance as yet. We are doing some of our own innovation to fill this gap, right? So yes, one is at a conceptual level. You must have been familiar with this unified namespace concept, right? Right now, if you have your OT assets, right, you have that definition or hierarchy maintained separately in your ERP, and then you have it maintained in your MES systems or shop floor systems. You have it in your historians, and then you have it in your cloud data warehouse, right? Is it standardized?
Everywhere.
Probably not, right?
No.
Uh, Now, there are a lot of governance systems for IT assets, right? So today, if I build a data warehouse, and Celebal specializes in building ERP, Lakehouse, and data warehouse on cloud, right? Getting data from SAP and other systems, right? We are one of the top partners for Databricks and Microsoft in that space, right? And probably one of the reasons Databricks invested in us, right? Which is also very unique for them to invest in a services player, right? There is reasonably good governance for IT assets, right? All my fields, my tables, my views, the definitions, things like that, right? Sometimes they are not as well synced with ERP. So Celebal has built those capabilities to sync, SAP or ERP security credentials or sometimes the glossary, etc., into Databricks Unity Catalog, right? What's missing is the governance for OT assets, right? For historical reasons,
Yeah.
first of all, the OT data was not even moving to most of the consolidated data warehouses. So that is changing now, right? So as that data starts coming, what Celebal is building capabilities on top of Databricks Unity Catalog and other systems is uh, to have some kind of governance and categorization and cataloging of those assets as well, right?
Yeah.
Now, as you rightly said, ERP, of course, there is a governance at the transactional level, right? You log in into ERP, of course, there is role-based security, etc. But sometimes it may get lost as you bring the data out. So we are making sure that that thing gets replicated. But
Hmm.
also there is similar capability established for all the OT assets, right? You're getting data from a set of sensors from a plant, like who has access to it, who should be looking at it, right? How do you marry it to the relevant ERP data, right? All that has to be governed as well. And I won't say this is an established practice, but I would say we are moving in that direction.
Would that mean that, I would say, the actual, would that then be the single source of truth? Would you have like one? It's not really a watchdog, but at least it's a would it be a single source of truth sitting on top of all these different systems?
Yeah, actually, that's the idea, at least from a data insights point of view, right? You may still log into ERP for different things, but as far as your consolidated lakehouse is concerned, right, this could be your single source of truth when it comes to getting business insights, maybe driving some automation or your data science, machine learning experimentation, building models, and also consuming all kinds of analytics data. Yes, we hope to see this as the single source.
Yeah,
Of course, this is not the system
yeah.
of origin, right? I'm not
Hmm.
saying this is replacing ERP or the OT systems, right? But this becomes the truth for most of your business users to consume information and
Yeah.
to get insights.
But it's interesting because there is no way we're gonna replace these systems. It's as you said in the beginning, you're not gonna replace the brains of your enterprise, and you're also not gonna replace the brains of your shop floor just because you want to have some kind of an integrated data model. So there needs to be sitting. You need to, I would say, work with what you have, and then somehow extend it. I'll get back to. I have some other questions about, I would say, the machine learning stuff you mentioned, but you also mentioned Lakehouse. So maybe worthwhile to define it a bit more. I think most people, they are now aware about a data lake and a data warehouse, but a lakehouse, while maybe known already in the data world, not yet that known in, I would say, in the IT OT, people who are working in the IT OT domain. So, what is a lakehouse exactly?
So see, I think everybody is familiar with the concept of data warehouse, where you will get data from most of your transactional systems, or definitely from the ERP systems, and then do basic analytics on top of it, right? Typical data warehouses in the past have lacked capabilities on different varieties of data, right? Um or velocity and all the V's of the world, right? And data lake solved that problem, right? That hey, you have an agile data store that lets you dump data from all different sources without on day one forcing you the governance and discipline
Yeah,
that is more
yeah.
governed by IT, right? So it
Hmm.
gave a lot of flexibility
Hmm.
uh, at the cost of that, hey, data is not easily usable, and people started using the words like data swamp and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Of course, the performance was lacking, so you can't really run high performance analytics and so on. But you could use it as a general purpose data platform to get data and dump it from all different sources that anybody in the organization can consume, and do it at a in a distributed manner and a relatively low cost, because you're doing it on commodity hardware and things like that. And now you're
Hmm.
doing it on cloud as well, right?
Yeah.
The concept of Lakehouse was very interesting. It combined these two worlds, right? So you would still have sort of schema on read kind of capabilities, where to simplify, like without a lot of uh, processing of data with the help of IT, could still start accessing the data in a more agile fashion, right? So it combined best of both worlds. And then the data lends itself for analytics and machine learning. So it also has capabilities of all the building the models, deploying, all the ML ops capabilities, in addition to data ops, etc. And now that you can get the streaming data as well, the OT data, sometimes unstructured data, right? You come from the manufacturing world, so there are so many of these safety manuals and other unstructured documents, contracts, etc., that are dumped, but you can never get insights out of it,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So all that can be stored in a lake house, and now you have these wonderful GenAI capabilities to mine that wealth of information and combine all these data points.
I was going to ask the Gen AI question, but you beat me to it. So, what are Gen AI applications you are seeing getting, I would say, developed, piloted right now?
See, since we are on the GenAI topic, I know there is a lot of hype, and there are genuine use cases. Uh, the couple of use cases that the early phase of GenAI was serving is, you have chatbots that you can query, you have platforms within Databricks like Genie, etc. Uh, but also doing things like document mining, right? And we have been doing these use cases earlier as well, right? Because we have access to all the business glossary and we have insights what ERP data means. So obviously, we are in a good position to convert that into a business semantic layer and get these questions answered on top of that, right? But these use cases were already being done, right? Of course, with Gen AI, the capability and the intelligence of data mining and asking these questions, the ability to convert an English question into a SQL statement, they have gone much better,
Mhm.
right? So that's one part of it. Of course, there are innovations in vision AI which have been enhanced by some Gen AI techniques, right? Now the concept of agents is the next wave of Gen AI, where we are looking for hyper automation, right? Where you may or may not have a human in the loop, but you could have complex processes like a 20-step RPA process, which we used to have, right? You could have much more intelligence within that process, right? I see a lot of interest, and those are the kind of use cases that we are doing. I also see some resistance of taking the human out of the loop, right?
Yeah.
As large enterprises, we are not comfortable having machines take actions on our behalf, right? So maybe it's a combination of having this automation and having some humans in the loop as well. So you would get the notification out. It's up to you to approve or sort of reject a
Mhm.
request, right?
Mhm.
So let's say you did the analysis. Okay, do I need to approve this purchase requisition or not? Right? After all, the whole AI process, agentic AI process, but then you make a decision, right? That okay, I'm the one making the final call.
Isn't that also linked to, trust, or I would say trust in the results, especially for humans, is typically linked to I would say, having an understanding on like what has happened. So if there is a certain problem and there is a black box and you get a certain answer, then humans have the tendency to go like, yeah, maybe it is right, maybe for this one time, but I don't know what is happening in the black box, so I don't trust it. And then you also have, of course, the industries where validation is a point. That's yet something else. But how do you, especially for these agents, because then what as far as or my understanding is, your for an agent has, I would say, a specific task, and the or a smaller I would say contained task, and I would say they talk to each other, so they progress between from agent to agent. How do you create trust? So how do you make sure that people like the ones you just mentioned go like, yeah, this is, we can take the human out of the loop here?
See, things are getting better, right? And even if it's outside of AI agents, if you look at large organizations, right, sometimes an individual is not empowered to take the final call,
Mm-hmm.
right? It gets to the manager and the manager,
Yeah.
right? So there are 2 points to it. One, you mentioned the black box nature of AI, but I think that's not so much of a factor. It's the concern of losing control
Mm-hmm.
and the concern that, hey, AI may not have factored a certain scenario.
Yeah.
So we are not comfortable taking human out of the loop completely, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may or may not happen in future. It may happen in the future is what I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
feel, right? As it's like a self-driving car where it takes time for you to take the human out of the loop. We have seen the journey of fully autonomous cars, right? And there are those stages, right, of
Yeah.
partial, autonomy or full autonomous. So I think we are in that stage, right? Other thing I'm a bit critical about applied Gen AI is we sometimes tend to convert structured data into unstructured data just to apply Gen AI, right? I find that stupid, right? Uh, because see, structured data or any kind of machine job, right? It's already accurate, right? It's already pretty accurate at a transaction level, right? One other thing I joke about is, hey, Gen AI is about getting intelligent humans to build smart models so that they can talk to dumb humans, right? Because if you look at everything which is structured, it's already driven
Yeah.
by some API integration and things like that, right? It's not much abstract, right? Now, where it applies very well is, of course, when you have this text mining or when you have a conversational scenario where you just want the comfort of talking in English and executing a command. Obviously, GenAI plays a very, I'm talking about the large language model part of GenAI. And of course, there are much better applications in the consumer space, right? But yeah, it does help in automation, simplification, because enterprise users also don't want to talk to too many systems,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
if you put
Yeah.
that LLM layer on top of it and the agentic framework on top of it, right? You could abstract a lot of that, right? You let's say there are multiple ERPs, there are multiple CRM, logistic systems, whatever, right? And if you have an interface that talks to all of this and abstracts it for the user, right? Just like search, when consumer search came in the form of Google and all these tools, right? That abstracted
Yeah.
this whole, so I call it like the transition from Yahoo directory to Google. I don't know if you are that
Yes, yes,
old
yes,
to
yes.
remember Yahoo directories, right? Where
Yeah.
you are going through this step by step until you get
Yeah.
to what you're looking for, right? Um, as opposed to just asking a question, right?
I even, but this, I was very young. I even was the moderator or admin for one of these directory pages. If you think about that with the world we're living in right now. So I was, I don't know, I think I was the moderator of a page called internet or something like that, like, or developer or something like that. So I listed websites where you could find developer resources. It's like totally unimaginable that these types of directories they would still exist today.
Yeah, so now you have this search that you can bypass all those instructions, and
Yeah.
my hope is, and it's a loose analogy, that these agentic frameworks would bypass the complexity of all these multiple transactional systems, multiple steps, right? And if you're familiar with ERP, there are certain processes where there is a 20-step process before you get to doing something, right? Uh, can that be automated? It was partially being automated in RPA. Now that automation gets more powerful, it can also abstract certain jobs which may not be super structured, right? For example, if part of it involves you to go and check the profile of a potential customer before kind of approving a credit or something, right? That's where agentic AI really adds value.
Is there? We're getting close to the end of this episode, but one thing I'd like to ask is we talked about regional differences. We didn't touch the, I would say, the difference between smaller companies and multinationals. One of the complaints I hear quite often is people from a smaller company going like, yeah, but they have 25 data scientists and 30 data engineers. Yeah, of course they can build such a thing. Um, are you what do you think should happen to make these types of technologies available for everybody?
That's a great question. See, and as it is, we are seeing some democratization of this whole data scientist role, right? So you have citizen data scientists, right? But you have to take it in the right context, right? If you're trying to use certain common language models, right, which is kind of abstracting a SQL, asking a question, and etc., right? Those things are getting more and more automated. Like you see how Genie is available as part of Databricks Lakehouse and so on, right? But yeah, if you're looking to build more custom complex models in the context of your organization, there is some knowledge and expertise needed, right? And that's where it may be challenge for an organization that doesn't have a lot of uh, sort of technology expertise in-house, right? And that's where partners like us sometimes come in, right? We work with mid-sized companies as well as large enterprises, right? So yeah, absolutely.
select the right partner, and probably also really focus on domain knowledge. I think even the mid-sized companies, if they have, I would say, if they combine the right domain knowledge with the right partner, then still magical things can happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, all right. Super. Thank you so much for joining me. I think this is a perfect time to wrap up this episode of the ITOT Insider podcast. We also have a separate episode with Databricks. So I also advise our listeners, if you haven't done that, to also look that up on your favorite channel. Yeah, Anupam, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, and I look forward to seeing you at the Hannover Messe event.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also to our listeners, thank you for tuning in again. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe at itotinsider.com, leave us a rating, and see you next time when we bring you more insights on bridging IT and OT. And until then, take care. Bye bye.